I will do that too. Greetings to one and all from Loyola Marymount University, LMU. LMU is excited to welcome you to this interactive presentation led by Professor Michael Howard, who teaches courses offered through the Loyola Marymount University program, online program, The Presence of Black Catholics in the Church Today and Tomorrow. My name is Bob Hurto. I'm the director of the Center for Religion and Spirituality at Loyola Marymount University. And I'm happy to introduce Professor Howard in just a moment. Professor Howard will moderate a conversation between Dr. Darnese Martin and Sister Laura Nettles, who will explore the lives of two contemporary prophets, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and servant of God, Sister Dr. Thea Bowman. We strongly encourage you to use the Q&A function to ask questions and make comments, as your participation will not only enrich the discussion, but also make it more engaging. At the end of our conversation, we will entertain a few questions and provide you with information about our upcoming online courses and other events for fall 2024, programming that is designed for Black Catholics and their allies. So now it's my good pleasure to turn things over to Professor Michael Howard.
Well, thank you, Bob, and for your introduction. And Bob, I hope you and all our guests are ready for an exciting and robust conversation between two sisters from another mother, adjunct Professor Darnese Martin. And we'll expound on the prophetic utterance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And then we also have Sister Laura Nettles, who is a theologian from the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. And I'm just excited that we are together here. I got to ring my bell. There we go. Wake us up, get us ready for this robust conversation. First, I want to talk to Dr. Martin so that she can give us a little bit about how long she give us a little bit of information about her life and how long she's been working with LMU and And I'm interested in finding out how were you able to come from the Protestant faith tradition, continue to practice Protestantism, and embrace the Catholic tradition, and then also, Dr. Martin, why don't you tell us how you got started in designing this course called The Presence of Black Catholics in the Church Today, Tomorrow, for Black Catholics Online. Dr. Martin.
Well, thank you, Professor Howard. That's quite a lot that you've asked me, and I'm glad to be here having this conversation. I came to LMU almost 20 years ago now. Is it 19 or 20 years ago? And I started in the Center for Religion and Spirituality. And one of our primary goals was to reach out to the local community. I mean, that's kind of what Jesuits say they do. They have universities in the middle of a city and they want to reach out. And so we decided, I guess Bob and I as the director, that, we were going to try to figure out what would be, really meaningful and authentic in terms of reaching out to a community. And so we really got involved with the LA African American Catholic community. And so, yes, I was part of the initial sort of, I don't know, programming when we were in our infancy. And I taught in that program and, helped design it based upon what we thought would be most helpful, would be most authentic to the needs of the people. And of course, over time, it has changed because what happens is you realize, oh, we should do this or we should focus on that. The people really want this. People can be helped most by that. And so, happily, we've been able to sustain what we do and make the necessary changes. And yeah, all right. What else did you ask me? You asked me about being a Protestant in a Catholic environment, kind of a thing.
Yeah, because
And
Sister Thea was Protestant and she became Catholic.
oh
And
gosh, see,
you
here you
never
go.
didn't make the leap, but you sure
Well,
stayed with us for a long time.
okay. Well, the Jesuits got me in like what year? Before I came to LMU, I worked for the University of San Francisco, and I was in my doctoral program in Berkeley, and I had a job at the University of San Francisco, and I worked with a priest there, Father Tom Lucas. And what can I say? The Jesuits got me, and then I started saying, yeah, I mean, I started to learn more because I was surrounded by Jesuits, and the Jesuit mission, finding God in all things, really resonated with.
Okay.
I mean, I thought that was something that I was like, well, yeah, right. Like I was just down for that, right? And then I had an appreciation for the ritual. Protestants kind of don't have that ritual thing. Same way.
Okay.
Black Protestants have praise and worship. I mean, we got that in spades, but there's a certain meaningfulness to the ritual that I really appreciated. So, no, I did not make the leap to convert, but I feel like because I'm constantly around Catholics that I kind of get it anyway.
Well, you're just as Catholic as anything else, girl, because Protestants believe in that baptism of the Holy Spirit, and Catholics love to bless themselves in the name of the Holy Spirit. So,
There you
welcome,
go.
welcome, welcome. Thank you, thank you. But I'll be right back with you in a few minutes. I'm going to get Sister Lauren Nettles up here, and so that she can tell us about her life with the congregation of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. That's a lot. Maybe I should just say FSPA, get it over with. That's what we're going to do. Okay, okay. And she's part of the anti-racism team, and she's actually working on her PhD. So I'm going to one day have to call her Dr. Nettles real soon. And she's doing this study, systematic theology at Chicago Theological Seminary. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And you actually do stories about Sister Thea Bowman, or you do some presentations about Sister Thea Bowman, and you know something about the canonization process, right? Can you shed some light on that for us, please?
Sure. So my community, by the way, the FSPA, and it is a mouthful, so we do just use the initials, right, is the very same community that Thea was a part of. So I'm proud to say that I'm in the community that she was in. And we are absolutely excited to have partnered with the Diocese of Jackson, Mississippi, which is where Thea died, right? She died in Mississippi. And in 2018 started the process of getting Thea canonized to be one of the first Black women saints here in the United States. This canonization process is kind of complex. Everything is when you go to the Vatican. Everything gets complicated with the Vatican.
Okay.
But it's about a 5-step process, and she's on step number 2. And that means right now that we're calling her a servant of God, means that here in the United States, the U.S. bishops have said, yeah, there's something special about her. We sent her information to Rome, and they are in the process of fact-finding. So they're getting us to collect all these testimonies about her life. We are transcribing all of her writings. We have a lot of her speeches and things here in my community handwritten. So we're transcribing them, getting them in word form to send to the Vatican. And we're looking for people's experiences of Thea to talk about how she touched their lives and continues to touch their lives. So again, we're only about step 2, but we'll get there. I know we'll get there with her.
Yes, and you know, I think that's the reason why what we're doing. This conversation is keeping Sister Thea's story alive, right? We already know that Dr. King's story is alive and well, but we are now trying to also maintain a certain notoriety with Sister Thea Bowman. So welcome, welcome. Let us, you know, before we get deep into the conversation we're going to have tonight, I want to ground ourselves in a conversation with prayer on 2 scripture passages. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells the audience, "Behold, I'm sending you like sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpent and innocent as doves." Then in John's Gospel, Jesus prays these words. He prays these words. He said, "I pray not only for them, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, so that they may all be one." And to me, Dr. King and Sister Thea exemplified these passages. They faced challenges like dealing with the wolves, yet they were wise and gentle, just as Jesus urged us to be. Their words, whether through sermons or songs, echoed Jesus' desire for unity among all of God's children. I can't think of anybody else who would, as far as to put these 2 words together, wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove, and they were definitely wise. So I'm gonna start with Darnese. She's our specialist in Protestantism right now, and she can just tell us something about her thoughts of Dr. King and his prophetic verse. So maybe she want to tell us what it means to be a prophetic person. Can you do that, Dr. Martin?
Sure. You know, when we use this word prophet, oftentimes we think maybe somebody from the Bible, right? Or we think of somebody who's removed, who's by time, history, almost a superhero, somebody who's not real. But a prophet is someone, like we can say that somebody is in the prophetic role. And that means that they've taken on the mantle, right? To speak truth to power, to be kind of the boots on the ground person, to hold a vision of what we might say God's kingdom is really supposed to be among human beings, well, really all life on the planet. And there are some people who answer that vocational call, who say, I will do what it takes, knowing that mostly this isn't going to go well for me personally, right? Because power structures don't really respond well to that. Because really, who gives up power and privilege willingly? Normally, there is a power, a prophet, or a social, we might say social justice people, social activists who show up on the scene. And we're like, oh, well, these are troublemakers, these are rabble rousers, or whatever, you know, they're picketing all the time. But they're the ones who show up and say, you know what, we are falling short. If we're going to use the title prophetic, because that has that, you know, spiritual connotation attached to it versus social justice warrior, right? But the prophetic says, I'm going to show up and remind us that there is a vision that we say we are leaning into, right? If we're a people of faith, we're people of the book, let's say Christian, Jews, Muslims in particular, we say there's a certain beloved community. We say that we rule that way, like the United States of America says that we rule that way, we are that way, we want to hold those values, but we look around and we say, but not really. What is this? What happened to the love commandment? What happened to the love ethic here? Because these things, there's a gap. There's a gap between who you say you are and how you're behaving. So then the prophet emerges, and I will venture to say the prophet doesn't necessarily want the job. They don't necessarily want the job, but they answer. They answer that call, right? It's like, do you answer the phone when somebody's calling you on the phone you don't want to talk to? Well, you know how God is and how the Holy Spirit is. You're going to have to answer that phone, right? And biblically, we know the prophets, they all are like, oh, no, not me. Oh, no, I don't want that job. And yet stepped into it. So the prophetic, the prophet, the person in a prophetic role is someone who says there's a vision and we're not quite making it. We're not getting there. But guess what? Here's what we can do. And then present. And then take on the risk personally. And that's what, we're talking about in terms of Dr. King, certainly, and other people in that role. It doesn't usually go well for them personally as an individual.
Well, I agree with you. I'm thinking about my friend Amos in the Bible. And Amos, he told somebody, look, I was a sheep herd. I was doing my job, minding my own daggone business. I was minding my business, and then all of a sudden I get this call to go and prophesy. I didn't want this job, And and you said something that was really interesting that struck me that is so related to Sister Thea and Sister Nettles. Did you pick up the fact that she said that you go and you don't know what you're actually getting yourself into? And Sister Thea's father told her, if you go to this place, you being the only Black person, they're not going to love you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's Thea's early life. She was so enamored with the social justice aspect of the Catholic Church. I think she just assumed that all Catholics would be focused on that justice. And for her to make the trek to Wisconsin, I don't know if you all have been to Wisconsin, but it's still a pretty white state around here, right? So she came to a place that there were very few Black members in the society, right? Let alone being the only Black woman joining a community. Yeah, she did exactly what you were saying, Dr. Darnese, that whole risk, right? The stepping out and saying, I'm going to do this, right? But not knowing what it means, but willing to be there and to accept what that's going to mean.
Right. And that's what makes them so powerful is not only, they catch a vision. Like I call it a download, a spiritual download, that somehow you get this, I don't know, dream in the middle of the night or whatever it is. And then you can't quite leave it alone, or it won't leave you alone. You answer the call, and then you go someplace where you don't even know where, and you don't know what's going to happen exactly. Right? We know Abraham, like you say, okay, I'm going to go somewhere, and then what's going to happen? And you know how we are as humans. We don't typically operate well that way. We want to know who's talking, right? Who are you? Where am I going? How am I going to get there? How much money like we got to go all down the list. But the person who's willing to step into this role is really saying, I hold this vision and I believe in something bigger than me. I believe it came from someplace, from God. I believe it came, and therefore I have to keep moving. I have to put one foot in front of the other. Most of us just won't do that. And that makes the difference.
Yeah, it's that fidelity too. So it's not just it's of course the initial stepping out into, but the fidelity to something that is larger than themselves, to stay rooted and grounded, even when the world is spinning around them. You know, I can't imagine what it was for Dr. King the first time he got spat on or was thrown in jail, or, you know, there had to be times, I'm sure, where he was wondering why he was going to do this. I'm sure there were times with Thea when she was sitting there and the sisters are talking about her hair and trying to figure out the textures of her hair and touching her and asking her questions, where she was thinking, you know, if I just went someplace else, this could be a lot easier. But they both stood firm, right, in their call to something larger.
You know, just this whole idea of standing firm. And it seems like God has a way to bring up a event that makes it so that the prophet know they got a calling to stand for. Because if it wasn't for the 2 or 3 ladies that decided that they were not going to, you know, give their seat up on a bus, right? Rosa Parks, right? He took a stand, and that stand called Dr. King. And that's something that, you know, we have to look at in our own personal lives, that sometimes the event brings up the call and we must respond to it. So Dr. King, when he responds at that time as a young man, what were some of the challenges you think that he really faced at that point, Dr. Darnese? And the same thing for you, Sister. What do you think it was that really, you know, cemented them in that call to continue to go forward?
Well, we know Dr. King was very young man. I mean, we look back on it. We even, you know, having taught for so many years, college students tend to think that these heroes are much older, even at the time of their passing. But he was a very young man. And, you know, he probably imagined himself going to be heir apparent to his father's church and live a life as a pastor and pastor people in a community. Well, here comes this other thing that drops into his spirit. And taking one step, right, doesn't mean that he understood, oh, you're really getting ready to step into something monumental. So, you know, Michael, you were kind of, there's like something that shifts the culture. There's an event. There can be an action that shifts the culture. And this is how any of us could end up in a, you know, participating in something much bigger than ourselves, is we answer the call once, right? You answer the call, okay, I'll show up here. Okay, I'll show up here. Thinking, I'm just showing up at a meeting. I'm showing up to help this one person. And then there's a momentum. So I think, you know, we know about Dr. King that he was admired for his preaching style. And because he said yes to one speaking engagement, people said, come to my church, come to my church, come to my church. And then before you know it, the whole nation is saying, well, not the whole nation, many cities are saying, you know, come here and help us. And then I don't know at what point he got like, oh, this is not where I'm just ministering in a church, right? To people who want to hear me talk on a Sunday morning. This is something else. And then to stay in it, again, as a young man, 20 something, then into his early 30s. Like, I'm sure he thought, I'm just trying to be home with Coretta. I thought we were going to have a nice little life, preach the gospel. Yeah. And then the momentum. And again, the fidelity is, as Sister Laura said, fidelity to the mission, the commitment. My father used to always say, sometimes you don't like it. You say you've already agreed to be committed to the commitment. And sometimes you don't like it, but you've agreed to stay committed to the commitment. And that will carry you through.
Absolutely. Well, I think for Thea, she had, by all accounts, by anyone that knew her, and certainly you can see in her writings, just an absolute deep, mature spirituality at a very young age. I think a deeper spirituality than certainly I had when I would have been her age, right? And so this fidelity to this God, the God of her ancestors, right, was incredibly profound to her. And I think that's what carried her through her early religious formation. And I think those were some of the challenging years where she was in Mississippi, had to leave Mississippi, was in La Crosse, Wisconsin, couldn't visit family. I think it was her deep spirituality that grounded her and kept her there. But I think kind of like Dr. King started preaching, at a church here and there, I think that moment for Thea was in teaching. She understood that education was the way that you transcend the challenges of the day, if everyone had access to education. And so I think it was in her teaching where she started just with a class full of students, right? And she had initially a class full of pretty white students because she taught here in La Crosse for a while, and started to speak and started to share her message. And as her message developed, and as she realized that people needed to hear this beyond just this classroom, she started to inspire people, started to invite her, and it just sort of she became kind of larger than life with her speaking and her going around. And I think she evolved along with the call or the request from others to have her come and speak. But I really center her in her spirituality and in education. Those were two profound things for her.
Yes,
We,
go ahead.
we know, we know now more about Dr. King's internal life, like his, I think it's kind of public knowledge now that he really struggled with depression. We've seen that picture of him, at the table. You can just imagine the number of times that he would have asked himself, what am I doing? And what is the cost to my family? I mean, the real physical cost to my family. And going within, I can imagine to say, not, I'm trying to picture like there's the depression that he might have felt as an individual, right? And then there's the conversation with God, that internal conversation with God, where it's like, how can I hold all of these things? And I just want to give up. I just can't take it. I'm not going to make it. I'm just not going to do it, right? And knowing all these other people have come to rely upon him, and more people have come to really expect him to change, racism in America. And so I imagine that he had to really draw on those inner spiritual resources. I was, acquainted with Howard Thurman's spirituality, right? Like, where do you go when essentially it's just you and God, right? Like, you can't, he had people, but they don't necessarily get it. And they're looking to you like, don't you have the answers? Then and like, okay, I guess because I'm following God's guidance, but at the same time it's scary out here, and some days I don't know that I can make it.
I tell you, go ahead, sister.
I was just going to say to Dr. Darnese, like, I appreciate you highlighting his struggles, his inner life. I think that's the stuff that actually needs to be made more public. It's fully who they were to struggle. We know that Thea was angry. Thea went through a period of great anger at my community, right? Great anger at her own religious community for not always loving and supporting, or for being racist and being stubborn to not see that racism. And I guess I worry about when we talk about these prophets, when we talk about a Thea, or we talk about a Dr. King, that we like to just tell the stories that make us feel good. Right. And we don't talk about their pain and their struggles and the anguish and the things that they themselves would have called maybe demons, because all of those things make them who they were. Right. Thea was a joyful, happy woman who had great anger for the way that she was treated and the way that she was treated in the church. And all we do is whitewash if we just simplify it and say, wow, great, Dr. King gave a lovely speech, the mountaintop speech. And then we go back and just do our own thing. We have to look at his whole life trajectory and everything that he struggled with.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, that scene with Dr. King at midnight and get that phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning. And, he hesitated about answering the phone. He even hesitated, but he answered the phone because the family was sleeping in the other room. He lived in a really small house.
Mhm.
And so, it's like his phone, when the phone rang in the kitchen, it rang all over the house.
Right.
And for him to really, I would just, to wrestle about answering the phone. And then you hear, words like nigger, we're going to bomb your house. And I think that's that's when we have to have that centering. We use that word a couple of times tonight, centering. How
Mhm.
you center yourself in the midst of the darkness and the anguish and the anger and the trauma and the disappointment. And we can go on and on and on. But yet, these two prophets centered themselves. Can we talk about that centering? Is there it may not be a 1, 2, 3 process, but is there a certain amount of things that we or the listening audience can do the next time we find ourselves in that point of, oh my God, my back is against the wall, and guess what? The wall is falling down, right? I'm leaning on the back. My back is against the wall, but the wall is slowly falling.
Yeah.
So how do we
It's
center ourselves in that? Can we talk about that for a minute there?
it's such a good conversation because if we don't talk about these things, other people, us, our neighbors, everyone, thinks that we cannot, right? Because they become superheroes, like a fictional character almost, right? And so if all we ever hear are the mountaintop speeches, or if we only hear, Sister Thea's voice and we're like, wow, she was wonderful and beautiful and all that, then people become removed and they say, I could never do that. I could never pick up the phone. I could never walk that prophetic path. So how do you do it? Well, one, I think like people I know in that type of ministry today, they say, I can't really think about the big picture, right? I have to stay centered on what is in front of me to do. So if there is a march, focus on the march. If there is, a food bank or something, what is the thing that's calling my name right now? Because if I try to think of all of these things, not only is that wall falling, I'm falling behind with it because it's overwhelming. And so, I think that's what the prophet has to do is say, what's in front of us right now? And we can get through this moment. And then we'll think about the next moment, because if we don't make it through this moment, then it's nothing to think about, right? So let us just gather our resources and stay centered in what we can do now. Who are our allies right now? And so I would say, anybody listening, who are your allies? What are you committed to? What can you say that you're really committed to? I always say to my students, not everybody is a boots on the ground type of person. Some people are check writers. Guess what? We need the check writers because somebody's got to fund the thing. And so really, what can you commit to, and who are your allies? And what's the thing you can step into that's right in front of you?
Thea, I keep saying, her deep spirituality, she absolutely believed in a God of love and a God of joy. For her, God was immense joy. That's what it should be, I hope, for all of us who believe that God is immense joy. But sometimes I think our theology can be pretty somber and mean, or we can portray God as angry. But for Thea, God was love and joy. And so to get back in touch with God when she was in an angry place or in a dark place meant to go find what gave her joy. And of all things for Thea, it was singing. I mean, I Google her, right? Go to YouTube and Google her. You will hear clips of her singing. She is singing to God. She is singing for God. And that's where she found joy. And so when those dark moments would happen, she would double down and find the center for her that was that joy. And for her, that was singing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about taking us back to what we need to do to find the hope.
Mm. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, there's a very interesting question on the board that someone actually want to know, why are we comparing Sister Thea to Dr. King? And the question, I don't know if you have it, but I just want to read it. I think it's really interesting. It came in at 7:28. The question is, why are you comparing Sister Thea to Dr. King? Given their lives, is this credible to African Americans, particularly since the institutional Catholic Church generally did not actively participate in the civil rights movement? With all due respect to Sister Thea, Dr. King was a blood martyred. His house was bombed, constant threats, murder, changed the country. Sister Thea did not face the same challenges and did not play the same role in the church or society. Thank you. Any comments about that?
Well, I would offer, it goes to what I just said, like some people are boots on the ground activists. Some people are the check writers. So there's always, I believe Paul said something about this in the Bible, people have their different gifts. But what Sister Thea was doing, and Sister Laura can certainly speak of, she was shifting the culture of the whole Catholic Church. But it might not seem like that from the outside, because here you have one Black woman. There have been others, but we're talking about her, right? So here we have one Black woman who was pushing from where she was. Like I just said, where are you? What can you commit to? What's right in front of you to do? You don't have to think about the whole big wide world. What is in front of you to do? And for Sister Thea to be so courageous, she was basically standing up against the entire Catholic institution, right? And so to be a Black woman who took that on, she shifted the culture. The thing is, to that person who asked, it's probably because we just don't know her. She doesn't have the same visibility. And so when I say she shifted the culture, many people may say, well, I've never heard of her, but I didn't know that. That's just because the spotlight is not on her as much. But here we are to talk about her.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to, certainly, I don't want to give a one-to-one. She wasn't a martyr in the very physical same way that Dr. King was, right? And I don't mean to discount that with Dr. King, but she is somebody who pushed and changed the culture. And I'm a living proof of that. I belong to a white community where we have 3 Black sisters, and that's it. And we are actively working to overthrow our own racism and our own white privilege and to unveil that. And without Thea and without Thea's call, we wouldn't be doing that work, I don't think, in my community. And if my community can do it, and if other religious communities can do it, then we'll get the church to do it. We'll absolutely get the church to do it. So, but I do think that's why we're here today, too, bringing in Thea so that people learn more about her. Right? She got the U.S. bishops to link arms and sing together. Right. That, to me, is her first miracle, right? Is getting the bishops to do anything together. She lit a fire that it's now ours to carry. Same thing with Dr. King. If everybody stopped after Dr. King died, right, then what change is there? Right. Change is not just one person, but it's how that person's impact, that ripple, and people take up their cause. So I do believe that Thea is a change agent. I believe she did while she was alive, and I believe that she inspires us to do it in her death.
And that's the point about the prophetic role, right? Is that there's a momentum and everybody's not doing it the same way.
Mhm.
Right? Everybody is not doing it the same way, and it's not invalid, right? And she had a different challenge on her life. She had a different kind of challenge on her life, and so it can't be that we only admire those who like literally took a bullet, right? I mean, we do, but it's like there's so many layers to the freedom struggle. Um, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. There's so many layers to the freedom struggle.
Thank you for that comment, that question. It does bring us to, okay, so we have this comparison, all right, and we have, we talked about notoriety, right? King got the spotlight, Sister Thea doesn't have the spotlight, but we know that if you live in the Catholic Church, like I've been for a long, long time, I may not have no blood shed, but I'm telling you right now, it's been many nights that my spirit was beaten down by
Mm,
racism.
mm.
And so yes, I thank you for those comments. So moving forward, we do have challenges. So right now, if in fact, when you look at it, what would you say with the challenges we have? Pick any challenge that you have right now, you see nationally. What sermon or saying from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or Sister Thea that you feel would inspire hope in our society amidst the political and economic and racial polarization that we're experiencing? Sermon or saying,
Um,
or bake a cake,
well,
whatever.
Dr. K, okay, if I was gonna just letter from a Birmingham jail from Dr. King, because in it, he is really talking to his critics, which come to find out were other clergy. But what he was saying is, this is why we can't wait. So what I connect that to is, our political process right now, we're not going back. The idea that has caught, momentum, that has caught enthusiasm and excitement, we're not going back. And so what Dr. King was writing to his critics in that jail was, we're not going back, right? He was saying why we can't wait. The clergy, his fellow clergy members were saying, you're doing too much, right? Why are you pushing so hard? Why are you so direct? Why are you so militant, basically? And essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but y'all can Google it, right? Letter from a Birmingham jail. Essentially, he was saying, well, how much longer? Wait for what? Wait for what exactly? Because we already covered power and privilege. People don't give those up willingly. So what am I waiting for? What are we collectively waiting for? And he mentioned his children. How much longer do I have to tell my daughter she can't go to that amusement park? How much longer do I have to tell my son, no, you can't drink out of that water fountain? And so, I connect those things to this idea in our political process. We're not going back. Why we can't wait? Go wait. Wait for what? Go back to what? Right. And so King was really responding to his critics like, you tell me then, what am I waiting for? And, that phrase, we're not going back. Go back to what? What will we go back to? Especially for those of us, people of color, we're going back to what? So typically you ask any Black Americans, would you want to go back in time? We're like, in this country, what would be more ideal? No, we're not. So anyway, I would say from King, we can read that letter from a Birmingham jail through the lens of there is always the voice of power that says you're doing too much. You're trying to move the society forward too fast. We're not ready. We're not ready. Meaning I want to hold on to what I know, or even take it back a few steps so I can be more comfortable. Dr. King said, no, we're not doing that.
Mhm.
Wow. Very timely words, very timely words. We're not going back. Sister Nettles, what do you say? What do you have to say?
Yeah, well, it's wonderful you brought up Letter from a Birmingham Jail, because that was an inspiration for Thea, right? And Thea used quotes from that in various talks that she gave, right? To
Mm.
say that the time is now, that
Mhm.
there's not going to be this perfect time
Right.
for all things to magically happen. We have to do things now. I think for me, of all the inspirational things that she said, given our conversation tonight, I would use, she has a famous quote. It gets kind of misquoted a little bit, right? Misattributed in some ways. But she basically says, I think the difference between me and some people is that I'm content doing my bit. I'm doing what I'm doing. Others tend to give up, right? Or don't think that they can make a difference. So I think one of the problems that I see in the world today, right, in light of all the issues, is that everything is just so enormous. Everything is big. I can't end homelessness. Laura, cannot end homelessness, right? I can't end racism. I can't end fill in the blank. And sometimes I think that causes us to stop, right? If I can't end homelessness, then why am I even going to bother looking at homelessness? And Thea was all about what you said, Dr. Darnese, right? That start where you are. We can't give up. We have got to keep working where we are in our small ways. We all have a sphere of influence. And that's really, I think, what Thea was about, is just inviting people to do their part where they're at. And if everyone did that, she actually likens it to a candle, right? And if everyone would light that candle, look at the tremendous light that there would be. I think for me, the other one that I would, oh, sorry, you want to jump in there?
No, go ahead. You're good.
The other one for me, and I don't mean to use it because it's cliche, because you see it all the time with Thea, is in her speech to the U.S. bishops, when she's sitting before the church and she says, who am I? Right? And then she says, I bring myself, my whole self, my whole Black self, my experiences. And she lists a number of things. If we can't look around and recognize that, we're denying people's experiences, or we're truncating experiences, or we're not letting people be fully themselves, then we have a problem. And I think what I see in the world is that we don't want to let other people's experiences and other people be. We want people to be like us. You need to think like this, or you need to think like that. And for Thea, she's reminding us that we have to be fully who we are. And if we are not part of systems and structures that allow people to be fully who they are and to flourish as who they are, then we need to do our part to change those systems and structures.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions here. I think one of them we just answered. What made them so effective that we can learn from and use today? I think we've answered that just now. One question that we do have here, though, could you make the same wonderment about Howard Thurman and how he navigated the civil rights movement? He was not an activist or a martyr in the way of Dr. King, but he was a spiritual center and a mystic that fed the spirituality of resistance. And I would just say that they both fed the spirituality of resistance. So let's just talk about that. And that I mean, Howard Thurman being the mystic, what about that spirituality of resistance? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I just mentioned him. He influenced a generation. Again, there's just some names that we know off the top of our heads, and there are other people who we just don't know as much. And so, we could talk about all the different kinds of people who influenced Dr. King, right? I mean, class, I would say Ella Baker and all these people, A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin. But definitely Howard Thurman's sort of mystic spirituality, which is actually what I kind of gravitate towards myself, is not wanting to necessarily name things. Like I always say, God is so big, we can't really name God, right? But we work with what we can. And so Thurman brought this additional, I want to say center, an additional kind of spirituality to say, well, because it's got to be somewhat universal. We're not all thinking the same. We're not all the same, but we have an understanding that somehow we're in this together. There's a mystic spirituality in that. We're in this together, moving ideally in the same direction, more towards justice, more towards love. And I think that's how it's what some of what Howard Thurman brought. But in the interest of time, we don't really have. We'd have to do a whole other program on Howard Thurman.
Yes.
And I would just add that there are so many amazing men and women who go unnamed, who influenced and who brought us to where we are today. Thea used to call on her ancestors. She used to call herself an old folks child, right? And that she would lean deeply into her ancestry, right? And all of the men and women that resisted, that said something can be different, life can be different, we can do things differently, right? So Howard Thurman, amazing, right? We could do a whole 5-hour talk just naming people, right, who have done amazing things. But I just want to lift up all of those who go unnamed, but who brought us to this point, who brought Thea and brought Dr. Martin Luther King to where they were. So
Yeah, I would say that the spirituality of resistance is definitely something that perhaps we should think about and invite a conversation about Howard Thurman because of his works and his mystic writing that he provides for us, the inward journey, and what does that mean for us. I'm excited that we've got a chance to answer some questions. We're going to try to wrap this up right now because it seems like when you're having a lot of fun and you're starting to go deeper and deeper, it's almost like, oh my gosh, the time is almost up. So I'm just thankful that Dr. Darnese Martin, you were able to come on board, and because we want to give Bob a chance to say a few words, and Sister Laura Nettles, thank you as well. Bob, you have some information for our listening audience?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you too to both Darnese and Sister Laura. This has really been an exciting time, as you foretold at the beginning, Michael. It's really been a joy and a deep time to think about what the message and the witness of those two prophets has been and will be in the future for all of us. Yes, and I would like to share a little bit of information about the other events that are coming up. This is part of one of this free webinar today on Sister Thea and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is part of the presence of Black Catholics in the church today and tomorrow, an online program at Loyola Marymount University. Professor Howard is our lead professor and course designer in that program. And I just want to share with you a couple of upcoming opportunities for furthering your study and your reflection. Let's see, hold on. I'll get there. There we are. Okay. Yeah. So this is our webpage, and I put the actual URL in the chat. And if you use the QR codes, there's the QR code that will take you right to this very same webpage. Okay. And what we have coming up is right down here under registration and such. We have a course. Professor Howard teaches a full course on living the Gospels with Reverend Dr. King and Sister Dr. Thea. That will begin on October 21. Now, this is a 6-week online course. It meets once a week for 1 hour. The commitment is not great, but boy, what you're going to experience in this course really is powerful. You see the price there, but I'm going to talk to you in a minute about financial aid and discounts and such. So hang in with me on that point. We are also Professor Howard is also teaching the first course of a 2-course certificate program in contemporary Black Catholic spirituality. In other words, if you take this course and then you take the companion course, which will be offered in the spring, you pass both courses successfully, LMU will award you the certificate in contemporary Black Catholic spirituality. And we have a really nice graduation ceremony that's online or on our campus. Either one, you can come to our campus if you're able, or participate online in that ceremony in June of next year. Yeah, but that course is Black Catholics sharing their distinct gifts of Blackness in the Catholic Church. And that also starts in October, another 6-week course being taught on Tuesday evenings for 1 hour for 6 weeks. We have a $40 early registration discount. So, people get the sticker shock when they say $380. They say, well, or take both courses, that's, $760. Okay, but you can get an early registration discount just by enrolling before October 7th. That's one type of discount. We have an additional discount, and that is if we get 5 people from any diocese or archdiocese that sign up for the course, each person gets an additional $40 off as well. Okay. Now we additionally have to help people think about how they're going to finance this. We have 2 forms of financial aid. We have what's called the LMU match. And the LMU match will match up to $130 any contribution made by your parish, by an institution, or by a group, or by your employer for your participation in this course. It's strictly speaking a match. So if whoever is supporting you is only able to give 100, LMU will also give 100. But if they will give 130, LMU will give 130. So you can kind of see how this adds up. That adds up to $260 already toward the cost of a course that costs $380. Really $340 if you get the early registration discount. Finally, we also have a tuition. We have a partial scholarship. It's called tuition assistance on our website. It's basically for low-income people who qualify for this type of assistance. You can also combine, if you qualify for tuition assistance, if you fill out the application and you qualify, and you can combine it with the LMU match, and you may end up taking the course for free. Just to say it, it's possible. Okay. So those are the courses that are coming up. We want to invite you to think about it. We found that people who take the courses find a great benefit, not just for themselves, but also for how they are able to better address the needs of their community as well. I think that whenever we take formation of ourselves seriously, whenever we take time out to delve deeply into something that will enrich our faith, it allows us it brings us more resources, as it were, for living our life, for carrying on day to day. Professor Howard, do you want to say anything more about those 2 courses?
Only that we're going to have a great time. I love having a good time in the Lord. So, we're going to come with some fire. We're going to come with our bells, and we're just going to come with an open heart and an open spirit to uplift the community and what we do.
And you're going to welcome a few people to these few guests.
I'm going to personally welcome. That's right. And I got my bell. There you go.
There we go. So we always invite at least 2 guest speakers to each of the courses, and the courses for Living the Gospel of Reverend Dr. King and Sister Dr. It's a little backward there. Sister Dr. Thea we're having Professor Diana Hayes and Professor Kim Harris on 2 different occasions. And then for Black Catholics sharing their distinct gifts of Blackness, we're very happy to welcome Father Greg Chisholm, Jesuit Father Greg Chisholm, former pastor at, what was it in Harlem? Which parish? I've forgotten the name of the parish in Harlem. My goodness.
He's in Baltimore right now.
He's in Baltimore now at the Jesuit residence, right?
Right.
And Adrian Curry is also the other guest speaker for that course. So how do you do it? How do you get involved here? Please, you can see in the chat our phone number. You can see in the chat our email address. You can see in the chat also our website. Please contact us. We're always happy to talk with you about how to make this happen, how to make it possible for you to participate in these courses that are coming up real soon. And Sister has also put in the chat where to learn more about Sister Thea Bowman and to follow her canonization process. Someone was asking about that a little bit earlier. So be sure you read the chat there and grab that link from Sister Laura. Thank you.
Don't forget the December slide.
Yes, and we have one more free event that is coming up, and that's coming up on the first Sunday of Advent, December 1. We're going to have another free online webinar on praying the Psalms during Advent. This will be led by Professor and Evangelist Michael Howard, with special guest Dr. Layla Karst, Assistant Professor of Liturgical Theology at LMU. If you've been following some of these webinars, you know she was on last year with Kim Harris to talk about their book, The Fire This Time. Important texts for the Black Catholic community, right? That's what that book is, For the Fire This Time. And her Dr. Karst's contribution in that was her work with Dr. Harris on a liturgy of lament for racism. So where do the Psalms take us, especially during Advent? That's the subject of this webinar. And I think with that, we are just about out of time. Professor Howard, any final comment?
Only that, I just want us to remember that we have so much rich history that we can take upon us and embody that can help us deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with right now. I think that, right now, you want to sing that song by Stevie Wonder, love is in need of love today. There's so much war, so much anger. Sister Nettles talked about the anger of Sister Thea, but she was able to harness that anger and praise God through the storm and through the rain. And we know that Dr. King, you answered that phone call at midnight, but he centered himself and called on the God within him to do what he was called to do. So I think we need to take that kind of information that we have tonight, and let's go out and express some love and change the narrative that we have been hearing on the news media, TV, and Facebook. Love is in need of love today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Howard. And I thank you all for participating in this webinar. It's been a great joy to see so many people here present with us. We will be posting this on our Facebook page very, very soon, the LMU Center for Religion and Spirituality Facebook page. I'd like to close with a very brief prayer, one that we all know. Glory be. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Spirit. Amen. God bless you all. Good night. Thank you all for being with us.